Hello, welcome and greetings to our first Coffee and Coaching Club meeting. And today I'm thrilled to welcome you. My name is Marjorie Saulson, and joining me on the call is my indefatigable and wonderful program manager, Margaret Johnson.
Hello.
Okay, so we only have a half hour, so let's dive right in. So our topic for today is speak with authority without being a jerk. And here's our meeting agenda. Welcome and introductions, which we just did. And then I'm going to be doing some coaching on how to speak with authority without being a jerk. And when you have some questions or something you'd like to share, please put it in the chat. Margaret will be watching over the chat, and at the end of our conversation, she will be asking those questions.
Friendly amendment, please put it in the Q&A box.
See now, you see why I need a program a director here, because I don't, what can I say? I'm okay with the slides, but this kind of program stuff, Margaret is the genius. And thank you very much, Margaret, for mentioning that. So put those in the Q&A box. Where is that Q&A box located, by the way?
Most people, if they go hover at the bottom of the screen, they'll see Q&A and chat, and they'll have that. So why don't we just test? If you can see that Q&A box, just type in the Q&A box, got it, or I'm here, or something like that. Great, John, thank you.
Okay, looks like we have conquered that particular type of gremlin. So let's dive right in. And I have to tell you that this was a kind of a difficult topic because there are many ways of being a jerk. And so I had to pick those that I thought would be most helpful to you, because I'm promising in these some actionable items, some good tips and ideas. So there are 3 annoying types of jerks that I'm going to cover, and easy ways to avoid speaking or coming across like one, because sometimes you can come across like a jerk and you have no idea that that particular way of acting is being perceived as a jerk. So consider this both warning and helpful. Oh boy, all over the place. This person just, wanders all over the place, and you have no clue what this person is talking about. This is Madame Disorganized. So what's so annoying about somebody who's talking and is disorganized? It shows that they're really too lazy or disorganized to prepare ahead of time. They don't have good organizational skills, and they don't get the help they need in order to be organized. And their message wanders all over the place. And in order to cover everything they really want to talk about, they tend to go way over time. And worst of all, they waste everybody's time. And even worse than that, they are boring. So, what's the antidote? How can you prevent yourself ever being perceived as a jerk in this way? Very simple. Get really clear on the message you want to convey, and have it be a message, not 5 or 6 or 10 different messages you want to squish into one little idea. And organize your points. If you're giving a presentation, this really applies to giving presentations, and organize your points so that they make sense. And 3 is a good number. So you can, a very simple organization is, today I'm going to discuss the 3 different types of jerks that we have, that you can possibly be or act as, and 3 ways to avoid doing that. And then the first one, which, as I told you, was Madam Confused and Disorganized. And so when you organize your points like that, it's really easy for people to follow what you're saying. And then use engaging presentation skills. What do I mean by this? I think we've all been at talks and listened to people who have a script of exactly what they want to say, and they stand up there and they read what they have written with no vocal variety or animation, and they put you to sleep. So you want to use vocal variety, and that means varying how you use your voice, tone of voice, speed, pause, emphasize certain words, and respect everybody's time. People are busy. And our half-hour session today starts on time and ends on time. I'm one of those who does not believe in punishing those who come on time in order to wait for those who are late. So be respectful of everyone's time when you want to make some type of presentation. So what's jerk number 2? The braggart. The braggart. And it's amazing that we can actually come across that way without meaning to when we are giving a presentation. So what's so annoying about this? They bore everyone with the list of their accomplishments. And then I did this, and then I did that, and then I got this award, and then I got that award, blah, 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 blah. Ugh. And basically they come across as self-centered narcissists who just talking about themselves, talking about themselves, talking about themselves. And worst of all, of course, is they are boring. It's very boring to hear somebody go through a whole list of their accomplishments in order to establish their authority and expert status. So what do? Here you have all of these wonderful things that you want people to know about you, especially if you're giving a presentation. What do? You don't do what I just said. You let other people introduce you and say how great you are. And this is where a written bio that you hand to the presenter comes in really handy, because you can write in that bio all the wonderful things you've done and accomplished and awards you've gotten and so forth and so on. And the other person is saying it. And by the way, even if you email this or mail it to the presenter who's presenting you ahead of time, do not assume that that person will bring that with them. I always come with my own copy of my bio in large print attached to a one of those things that I'm losing the word. Anyway, you attached to a piece of cardboard or something so that it won't rattle, and you give that to the person. And I have routinely found that people are glad to get it because they forget to bring the one I sent to them initially. And you can actually refer to your accomplishments, but only as part of a story you are telling. For example, when I was mentioning about vocal variety before, I could say a kind of an offhand way that one of the reasons I'm really can really help people with vocal variety is because I got training as a voice actor, and that's when I learned about speed and pacing and emphasis and so forth and so on. And so that's part of the story that I'm telling. When I'm working with somebody and we're going over their message, we look at what words need to be emphasized, where is a good place to pause, where should this be a question, where should this be a statement. And those are all things that I learned in that training, and that's what I share with people when they're concerned about their presentation skills. And the other antidote to being a really accomplished person who might somehow intimidate other people is always acknowledge other people's value and accomplishments as often as possible. And when anybody does anything that you find really admirable or helpful, or you just think it's good, even the smallest thing, it's amazing how that greases the wheel of good relationships when you compliment people. Compliments are pretty thin on the ground, it seems, and so people always appreciate being acknowledged. So, here's the third kind of jerk, the despot. Do this, do that. Ugh, what's so annoying about this type of jerk? They act like despots and boss everyone around. Do this, do that. They don't want to hear anyone else's ideas. Only their ideas are good ideas, and they just do what I say. And these types of people have to be right, even when they're wrong. Facts don't matter, other ideas aren't kosher, and they are really annoying, especially if they are in charge of a committee or a boss. And I have to tell you that if you're leading any kind of group that you want to get stuff done, it's really important not to fall into any of these bad habits. So what's the antidote? Especially if you're
Marjorie,
working. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interject this question. What we're talking about here, I'm sure nobody on the call thinks of themselves as being a despot, for example. What we're talking about here are how you might be perceived by others. Is that true?
That's right. That's right. What I'm talking about is behaviors that you don't think are a problem. For example, when you're the braggart behavior, when you're giving a talk, it's really important to know that you've got to give all of your bona fides, all of your wonderful things that you've done to the person who's introducing you in the introduction that you write out for that person so they say the things you want them to say. And you know, most of us don't think about that when we tell people what we do. We're excited about what we've accomplished. We think it's wonderful. And we don't understand that that's being perceived that way. And the same thing with being bossy. Telling people what to do, it comes very naturally to us. And it doesn't work too well.
Mm-hmm.
It
Okay,
really
thanks for
doesn't.
the clarification. I'll let you get back to the antidote now.
Yeah, I'm not, I want to make very clear, I'm not accusing anybody of being any of these things. I'm just alerting you to behaviors that might come across that way. So thank you, Margaret. I appreciate that. So what's the antidote to being perceived as bossy? Don't should on people. Well, you know, you really should do this, da 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 da. And that really comes across as an order. And people don't like to be ordered around. In fact, when people tell me, do this or do that, I immediately feel my inner 2-year-old coming out and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. You can't tell me what to do. So when you don't, I mean, you obviously need to tell people about things you'd like them to do, but not using the imperative, do this, do that, you should do this, is a good way thing to avoid. So what do? You speak in terms of suggestions and possibilities. So for instance, I did a lot of work in the volunteer world, and I was president and chair of a lot of different things. And one thing I learned about volunteering, if you don't treat a volunteer correctly, that person's out the door. And I'm reminded of this in a business context by something that Stephen R. Covey wrote in one of his books, that most businesses only pay people enough money so they don't quit, and most people only work hard enough so they don't get fired. And he went on to say, and this really resonated for me, that means when you're in business, you need to treat everyone who's working with you as a volunteer, because anything they do above the absolute necessities of keeping their jobs is really voluntary. So when you're working as part of a group of people, and if you're in charge, think about being a team leader instead of a boss. Speak in terms of suggestions and ideas, and invite other people to make suggestions. Once everything's been agreed upon, then it's appropriate to say, let's list out what's going to be done and who's going to be taking care of it. It doesn't mean you're sloppy, but it means you're respectful of other people's ideas. And that's the third thing I wanted to mention, that you do solicit other people's ideas and opinions. And especially even if they differ from your own, be willing to respect them and be willing to admit when you don't know something. This is really hard for us, really. you know, it attacks our sense of self to have to be willing to admit we don't know something. But I'll tell you, fake it till you make it does not work. Everybody's BS meter is always on. If you're trying to finesse people into believing that you know what you're talking about when you really don't know what you're talking about, they're going to think, oh, that person's full of it. So it's really important when you're working with other people to solicit their ideas, their opinions, and be willing to admit that you don't have all the answers. And that's the value, by the way, of brainstorming, where everybody just throws out ideas and nobody's allowed to say anything is wrong or bad. They just keep throwing out ideas. And out of that combination of thoughts and brain and ideas comes some really great ideas. So here comes our little conclusion about the 3 types of jerks that I was talking about. And this, to reflect back on what Margaret mentioned, 3 types of behaviors that can make you look like or come across as a jerk when you're really not one, or you wouldn't be listening to this presentation. Being disorganized. It's really important to be organized. Bragging about yourself in a context where you don't really mean to do it, but it's easy to do in certain contexts. And being a despot, telling people what to do. It doesn't work too well with your kids either, by the way. Basically the 3 antidotes that I was discussing, 3 ways to avoid being perceived as a jerk, is prepare ahead of time. And if you have trouble organizing your ideas and your thoughts, get help. I happen to be blessed with good organizational skills, and so that's one of the things I help people with. And sometimes it's just a question of taking the time to do it. Then let others brag about you. Instead of you bragging about yourself, let others brag about you. And this is particularly important when you're being introduced to a group of people or are giving a presentation. Let others sing your praises so that, and you can modestly smile and thank you so much for your kind words about me and so forth and so on. And then be respectful of other people and their ideas. One of the things that's really important in building good relationships with people, that know, like, and trust factor that everybody talks about so much that it's become a cliche. This is really important. So these are 3 actionable insights that I had promised to share with you about how to avoid being perceived as a jerk. Margaret, if I ever do this one again, I'm going to add that word perceived as in those words in there, being perceived as a jerk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have a couple of invitations for you before we get to the Q&A. First of all, I'd love to invite you to join our next Coffee and Coaching Club meeting on how to communicate persuasively without being salesy. And this particularly affects us when we go networking, because that's an opportunity to speak with a lot of new people, and it's really hard for a lot of people to feel comfortable in that situation. And of course, it's also true on sales calls and whenever you're discussing what you offer with people. And the very easy URL, which I really love and adore, to go to is coffeeandcoaching.club. I'm indebted to brilliant Margaret for telling me that one could use .club as an extension. Who knew that? Because I said, well, why don't we call it coffeeandcoachingclub.com? And she said, oh no, let's use .club. Yay, Margaret, thank you. And so, and please be sure to share this URL with any friends or on social media. We're always glad to welcome new people into the club. And my second invitation is to take advantage of my complimentary communication confidence assessment. You can find that at my website, vibrantvocalpower.com/CCA for Communication Confidence Assessment. And in that assessment, when you take it, you will see there are 10 different types of communication situations and you can assess which ones are ones where you feel really comfortable and which ones where you feel you need a little upgrading. And my belief is that you cannot solve a problem until you recognize that you've got one. And this communication confidence assessment will help you clarify where you might need to improve your communication skills. So that's my second offer and invitation to you. That is totally complimentary, and I invite you to take advantage of it. Now, let's deep dive into the questions. Margaret, what kind of questions have you got for me?
Well, I'm going to give you the softball one first, and if you want, I'll even answer it. I joined late. Will a recording be provided?
I will throw that ball right back into your hands.
So we will be posting the recording, and it will be alive until the next Coffee and Coaching Club, at which point we will take it down and replace it. So we will always have the recording of the most recent session available for you. And we'll be creating a library of recordings as well. We'll talk to you about that at another time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
That was easy.
That was easy. All right. So
what's the next one?
This goes back to the first kind of jerk a person can be perceived as, the wanderer, the disorganized. You said get clear on the message, but what's a way to do this when I'm in the moment? How do I take that beat or two to get clear before I have to say something? Okay,
so for one of my rules, my ironclad rules of communication is do not, now I'm going to be a despot because this is actually a do not do something. Do not allow anyone to stampede you into an immediate answer about anything. And if it's something you really, either don't want to answer or well, there's two possibilities. Number one, you can't answer it right away, or number two, you don't want to answer it at all. So if you can't answer or come up with a message immediately, you say, I need to think about that. Give me a couple minutes because that's not something I really thought about from that point of view before. And so give me a couple minutes and I will be able to share a thought or two that let me channel some wisdom and share it with you, something along those lines. And if somebody asks you something that is either confidential or none of their business, you can say that I appreciate your interest, and that's not something I'm at liberty to discuss at this time. Or that's something that I cannot discuss at this time. Because frankly, people are busy, very busy sticking their nose in other people's business. I think that's why People magazine is so popular. Yeah. Everybody wants to know the business of the stars and so forth.
Right. So just to follow up on that, is it fair? So if you're in the middle of a meeting and you have a contribution to make, you want to be clear about your contribution. But again, when you're in that moment, is it fair to say, just help me think through that for a moment and actually combine that need to be organized with the soliciting other people's ideas and opinions and actually thinking through it right live on the spot with the team.
And what you can do is, you can say, a thought occurred to me that might be helpful. It's along these lines, and I need some help clarifying it. I love that. That's very nice language. And the other thing, by the way, that happens sometimes, and I'm reminded of this because this is something I helped somebody with a couple years ago, as a matter of fact. This gentleman who works in a corporation came to me because he was very nervous sitting in meetings, and he was afraid, mortally afraid, he'd be called on to answer a question that he couldn't answer, and he was afraid that it would affect his chances for a raise or a promotion. And sometimes you are asked questions that you can't answer, period. And so I came up with a little system that I'll share with you briefly. I call it my ACED system, ACED, like I aced the test. And the A is for acknowledge. And you hear people do this all the time. You know, that's a really good question. Yeah, this is a system for buying time to give your subconscious a chance to give you an answer. The C is for clarify. The fact is, sometimes people ask you a question and it's not a good question. And you can't give a good answer to a bad question. So you say, you know, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that question. Could you clarify it, perhaps give me an example of what you mean? And very often, well, first of all, that forces the other person to clarify what they're thinking about. And it also gives you a better question that's possible to answer. And sometimes you even need more clarification. You mean in that situation, da, 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 da. And so that's the clarify. Now, the E is for elicit. Or in other words, elicit is to ask people for something. So you're in a group of people, and if you still haven't gotten the answer, you can say, you know, that is not an area of expertise for me that I've ever really investigated. Is there anybody else here who can answer this question? And if it's not a group of people, then you kind of skip that step, and you go to the D, which is either deliver, my subconscious gave me a gift from the spheres, and you deliver the answer, or you delay. You say, you know, I honestly can't give you a good answer right now. Let me do some research on this, and I promise to get back to you within 3 days or however long, and then do it. And the interesting thing about this, Margaret, people hate to say they don't know something because they think it makes them look like less than of authority or less than an expert. But when you are able, when you have the maturity and the self-confidence to say that you don't know something and you will get back to somebody, or that this is not your area of expertise and the person who can answer that question well actually is Sally or Joe or whoever else, that actually increases your authority and expert status. And the reason for that is people know that when you give an answer to a question or you state something, it is the truth as you know it. You are not going to try and finesse them with some phony answer. And I believe, honestly, that it actually increases your authority and expert status when you can say that this is an area where you're not an authority. I know that's counterintuitive, but that's what I believe.
It's actually statistically true. Like when you even look at Yelp, for example, you're looking for reviews on a restaurant. Good reviews have more power when there are bad reviews, which is interesting. Now, obviously, if most of the reviews are bad, that's a different story. But if you've got a few bad ones sprinkled in among many good ones, it actually makes the good ones more credible. Similar thing here. So I know that we have 1 minute left and we have another question that's come in. I think we may need to answer it offline. And I will get you that question, and the person who asked that question in the chat, we will get back to you with an answer via email.
Okay, dokie. So thank you so much for joining us, and do come next week and
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks to our next Coffee and Coaching Club meeting. It's on how to communicate persuasively without being salesy. And do take advantage of my communication confidence assessment. You can get it at vibrantvocalpower.com/CCA for communication confidence assessment. So long. It was lovely meeting with you.